Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Let's do it.
Champion of the world, Terence Bud Crawford.
So what is the two-time world boxing champion doing now? Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, the journey to Africa. Joining us to talk more about it is Leo Adam Bega, author and 2015 Andy Award recipient. Thank you so much for being here and welcome to the program.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kathy.
Leo, we're going to start by putting up a photograph for our viewers, and I'd just like you to tell me what comes to mind when you see this photograph.
Yeah, well, it's a young man that I've gotten to know a little bit through my work as a journalist. So, you know, he has a story that, is kind of a classic story where boxing became a pathway for him out of some rather harsh circumstances. And, and so that story applies to a whole lot of athletes. And he's part of a long lineage of athletes from North Omaha, Northeast Omaha in particular, African-American athletes in particular, who've achieved great things athletically, and their athletic abilities, and beyond that, their determination and their incredibly hard work took them out of some hard circumstances and brought them to another place in their lives. And Terence is the latest and greatest example of that. And that's a lineage that includes people like Bob Gibson and Bob Boozer and Johnny Rogers and Ron Boone and Marlon Briscoe and Gale Sayers and many, 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 many others. And I've had the pleasure of meeting all those gentlemen and interviewing them and writing about them. And Terence definitely is in their company.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did the two of you meet? You mentioned that you've written some stories, but what was your first meeting like?
I'm not sure I remember that very clearly, but I came to him just as any other journalist did. I knew something about his story going some years back, but I never, never pursued him as a subject until starting about not quite 2 years ago. And that was around the time that he was making real noise in his professional career, but he had a great amateur career, and he had fought in the National Golden Gloves in his hometown of Omaha and lost a very controversial decision. But I had never seen him fight. I'd never met him until not quite 2 years ago. And so you could say I was jumping on the bandwagon like a lot of other journalists, but his story is a great story. And so I pursued him as a subject, and I ended up interviewing him a number of times, interviewing family members and friends around him, etc. Some of his coaching team, so I can't claim I know him real well, but I did get to know him a little better as a result of this recent trip to Africa. That's for sure.
You've done a handful of stories on him. Is there a favorite that you have?
Yeah, there is, and I always count this as my favorite to date. That is because I'm sure I'll be writing about him more as time goes by. but it's a story I did for the New Horizons newspaper, and it was a very specific angle on his story. And it's the story of the relationship between himself and Midge Miner, who's a former amateur boxer here in Omaha. He's a man somewhere in maybe his 60s, something like that, maybe a little older. I'm not sure exactly, but Midge started coaching Terrence when Terrence was just a little boy. So they go back to when Terrence literally first started boxing in a formal way. This was at the CW Boxing Club, which is run by Carl Washington. And so that's where Terrence got his start. And the CW at that time, when Terrence started there, was operated, I believe, out of the basement of Carl Washington's home, which was in the same neighborhood as where Terrence lived. And Carl had coached Terrence's father, I believe, and maybe an uncle, or had worked with them in boxing. And so anyway, Terrence comes from a heritage of boxing in his family. And so he started fighting very young. He also participated in a whole lot of other sports, but boxing became his true love. And Midge has been with him all this time, more or less. He's still part of what's called Team Crawford, the group of coaches and managers around Terrence. So he's still someone that Terrence listens to, takes advice from, and he's learned a lot about boxing from Midge and a lot of other people.
Wow, and talking about relationships, we have another photograph that we'd like to put up, and I'd like you to share, please, who this person is and the relationship that Terrence has with her.
Sure, this is Jamie Nolette, and Jamie is a native Omahan, and she was Terrence's 4th grade teacher at Skinner Magnet School in North Omaha, and they had developed a bond then. Terrence, he had the various issues as a student in school, and as Terrence said, she was one of the teachers who really cared and would take time out to listen to him, because he had things going on in his life, and it accounted maybe for some of the acting out that was happening in school and outside of school. And so they developed this bond, but then, he just had her for that 4th grade year, and they moved on in their respective lives, and they only reconnected again in like the spring of 2014. And she had heard through the grapevine that he was doing great things as a prize fighter, and she reached out to him to say how proud she is of him, and that started a series of conversations. And then he found out what she does in life today, and she had relocated to Phoenix, Arizona, and at some point she had traveled to Uganda as part of a church mission trip. It affected her, it impacted her, and she ended up forming or co-founding a nonprofit called Pipeline Worldwide, which supports sustainability and self-sufficiency programs, empowerment programs for villages, works with organizations in Uganda and Rwanda and other countries to help particularly youth and women who are coming from very vulnerable, you could say, at-risk kind of circumstances and situations. And
that interested Terrence enough that they wound up taking a trip.
Yes, that's right. He expressed interest finding out what she does in going to Africa. He saw this as an opportunity that doesn't come along very often in one's life. So he had the interest and the motivation. He refers to Africa as the motherland, he's also been long fascinated with African wildlife, and a lot of things about going to Africa appealed to him, and so he told her he wanted to go, and she wasn't sure if he was completely serious, but indeed he was, and they went in August of 2014, and he knew soon thereafter that he wanted to go again. And then I heard that this had happened and that he was planning another trip, and I saw that as an opportunity to find out another side of Terrence Crawford, and share this experience with him and a group of other people. There were a travel group of 7 of us who went.
How did that shake out then, that you were able to go along with this group and kind of document things along the way? Tell us the story behind that.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm a freelance journalist, and so I was really not in a position to pay for it myself. So I knew about an international journalism grant that's offered through the University of Nebraska at Omaha called the Andy Award. and I had considered applying for it in the past. I just never got around to doing it. And I actually made 2 proposals for the 2015 grant. One was to go to Nepal with a group of eye doctors from Omaha. And the other was to go to Africa with Terrence Crawford and Jamie Nolet. And it turned out that the awarding of the grant was too late for me to go to Nepal, and that left the second option. And I was chosen to receive the grant along with Matthew Hansen of the Omaha World Herald, who ended up going to Cuba. And so I went to Africa with Terrence and company, and otherwise this wouldn't have happened.
Wow, how much did you actually know about Africa heading into this whole trip with these folks?
Yeah, embarrassingly very little. I fully admit that. And so I went, to these countries, Uganda and Rwanda, with eyes wide open, and really didn't even do much research beforehand. I created a lot of files on my computer related to those countries and to things happening in those countries, or things that have happened there, and I just kind of went as an innocent abroad. And I don't know if that was the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it, but it's the way I ended up doing it. I guess I didn't want to make a lot of prejudgments about what I might be seeing. So I'm not sure what my expectations were even exactly. I mean, I knew that we would be seeing some contrasts for sure, that that there's a lot profound poverty there, which is far beyond the poverty that we know of in America, just a different scale of it. That basic needs like water, in some cases, are very hard met. That is access to clean water. And we certainly saw evidence of that on the trip, where people daily have to go distances to fetch water, to retrieve water. And we're talking about men, women, and children, and it's just part of daily life there for a lot of people, especially those in the rural areas. And and I referred to contrast. I mean, we saw examples where you saw these gated communities of some affluence, with Western-style housing and hotels and whatnot, and within a very close proximity were out and out open slums. And so the contrast couldn't have been more dramatic. And I mean, there's similar situations even in America of that, but you saw a lot of this, and you're not sure how to feel about that. And we were in a part of a couple slums as part of some of the visits that we made, because a lot of the trip had to do with Jamie Nolet of Pipeline Worldwide wanting to introduce us to some of the organizations that they partner with, some of the individuals that they work with on the ground in those countries. And so we got to see how Pipeline tries to support some of the various needs there. And so we visited a whole long itinerary of different venues and organizations and programs who are trying to help, again, primarily youth and women. So
not knowing as much as maybe you would have liked to going into this whole trip, did you get there, Leo, and think, I really wish I'd have known that before you packed your bags, before you pulled things together? You land, and it's starting to dawn on you that maybe there's something missing in terms of what you didn't know and what you didn't bring.
I think my greatest fear going in, and it was more or less realized right from the start, is going to your point, Kathy, is that I was afraid that I would be seeing so much that was new to my eyes, and we would be, on the run, so to speak, going from spot to spot, usually by this minibus that was our main transportation in Uganda, or by Jeep, or by Land Cruiser, but it became such a blur of activities, even while you were in it, that it was hard, just to process everything that we were seeing and all the people that we were meeting. And of course, everyone else was there, not as a reporter. Right. So, I mean, they were taking pictures and everything, but they certainly weren't interviewing people. And so I felt a little overwhelmed at times, and I just had to surrender to the fact that I'm only human, and I'm not going to be able to capture everything. I'm just not going to be. I can do the best that I can do, and I just had to be okay with that, and I ended up being okay with that.
Wow. Now you mentioned taking pictures, lots of pictures taken on this trip,
Yes.
and we're going to put up a few for our viewers. We'll start with this one, and if you could just kind of set the stage for us. And
Sure. This is Terrence with a famous humanitarian figure, Sister Rosemary. She has a last name, but I can't remember it or pronounce it, even if I had it in front of me. But she's been recognized a lot internationally. She runs, among other things, something called St. Monica's, and this is in Uganda. And St. Monica's is devoted to helping girls and women who were variously abducted by rebels during the Civil War, and some were made sex slaves. Some were forced to do terrible things like kill siblings and friends, and this her efforts and the efforts of her fellow Catholic nuns and a lot of partners are focused around giving these girls and women, now that the Civil War has ended, now that they are in many cases homeless, they've lost their families, they've lost ties, to having some semblance of a community, of a home, a sisterhood, and these are some of the young women themselves, and they're given education, they're given vocational training, and they're able to actually even make some income for themselves and for the efforts of St. Monica's through things that they create with their hands. And a lot of it has to do with creating like apparel items and bags and purses out of very simple items, but they make the most beautiful items that you can imagine, beautifully colored and patterned.
yeah.
And people, later at the end of the program, people can see a link that will bring them to some of the programs that people can actually access these apparel items.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's go on to Rwanda and our
Sure.
next picture, Leo.
Sure. This is one of many stops we made in a short time. We spent most of our trip in Uganda, 8 days and 7 nights, and then we spent 3 days and 2 nights in Rwanda. And so we were moving fast in Rwanda comparatively to get in what we got in. And this was a pygmy village that we visited, and again, extreme poverty, subsistence level of living, where people they make a little bit with these pots that they make and sell, and they have a water source that is only accessible for a certain number of months out of the year, and then for a few months it dries up, and so that forces them to find water in other ways. And wherever we went, whether especially in these kinds of situations, rural, isolated regions, it's not that they never see Westerners. They certainly do on visits of the kind that we were making, humanitarian type of visits. But great curiosity and great appreciation for anyone who's taking the time just to kind of meet them, to see how they live, and maybe learn a little bit about what some of their needs are. And the hospitality we got from them and everyone else we visited was just wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a picture of a man and a woman, and we want you to talk with us a little bit about the story behind this photograph.
Yes. This is also in Rwanda, and these two people, they were neighbors before the genocide that happened about 20 years ago in Rwanda, and the man was complicit in some way in the killing of her husband, even though they were friends. And she also lost 2 of her children to the genocide, who were murdered. And so he, like many of the perpetrators of the genocide, ended up serving time in prison. And like some perpetrators, he admitted his offenses, his crimes. And through a program which goes by CARSA, which is founded and run by a man named Christophe, who was our guide leader in Rwanda, a series of workshops and other activities are held where they bring together perpetrators and survivors of genocide and people who have direct relationships with each other, like this man and this woman, to work through all that pain, the anger, to try to get to a place of reconciliation and forgiveness, and so that they can live peacefully, as neighbors once again. And these two people, we met them, they each gave us their testimony, tell us that they are at that place in their lives. And I mean, it seems impossible, but they seemed very genuine, and they both got emotional talking about what had happened. As part of that program, they share a cow, which you can see the back end of in that image, and that's partly as a way to make them kind of codependent on each other. It's part of this kind of peaceful coexistence that is aimed for. And Christophe, fully admitted that not every perpetrator makes amends. Not every survivor is prepared to forgive, and that's understandable. But these two, and there are other examples, have gotten to that place.
Wow. Final photograph in this series is the champ at a press conference. Kind of tell the story behind that photo.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite activities because I had an inkling before we left for Africa that this was in Uganda, in Kampala, the major city there, a city of millions, and that they were very excited about having Terence Crawford visit them. And so we first met, you're seeing Terence sitting beside one of the sports ministry officials. And we first had a private meeting with he and several other officials at an office building. And then we went from there to this press conference, which was held outside, that is outdoors, adjacent to a local boxing gym called the University of Pain. And there was a gathering of, again, sports officials of various kinds. There were media, of course, local Ugandan media, and many, many boxers. I think mostly amateur, but I think there were a few professionals among their ranks as well. And Terence was treated like, visiting royalty. I mean, they almost literally rolled out the red carpet. And this was very important to them. It meant a lot to them. And they expressed that in various ways to him and to the rest of us. And Terence handled that situation well. I mean, he was very, I think he exuded humility and gratitude, which I think also was very greatly appreciated. They also were very struck by the fact when he told them that he's friends with two native Ugandan boxers, both professionals, both living in the States and fighting out of the States. And they were very impressed by that. And boxing is a big sport in Uganda. They turn out a lot of champions, especially at the amateur level, in things like the Commonwealth Games, the Olympic Games, and they've had some professionals with some success. And Terence spoke from his heart at that press conference and in that meeting prior to the conference, and he told them about some of the hard circumstances that he's come from and how boxing got him out of those circumstances, and that he's gotten to where he is only through extreme hard work and dedication and discipline. And when he was making these remarks, he was speaking directly to the boxing contingent there.
Wow. Just a few minutes we have remaining. So there's a group of you that goes on a trip to Africa. It's a 12-day adventure. We're going to put up a photo of the group, and just tell us briefly what you experienced in terms of a shift maybe in dynamics from the start of a trip like this one to the finish.
Yeah. Well, most of us did not know each other. So Terrence and I, we knew each other as, he the subject, me the reporter. And so we'd spent, very little time together before, other than just, being in interview sessions, me hanging around the gym a little bit, that kind of thing. Terrence and Jamie certainly know each other well. The young man to the very right of this image is Joe Sutter. He's a recent Millard West graduate, and he's a cousin of Jamie's. So there were some associations there, and there was a gentleman who's not pictured here named Scott Katsky, who's an Omaha native but lives in LA, and he grew up with Jamie and her older brother. So there were those connections, and then there was a girl who's a recent high school graduate. You can see her head popping up there between Terrence and Jamie, Julia Brown from Phoenix. And that was our group. So but some of us had never met before. We didn't know each other. And Jamie had said we're going to become like a family by the time this is all through. And that was more or less true. And we got to know each other fairly well.
Yeah.
I think it was all in all a healthy dynamic. Yeah.
Wow. 30 seconds. What is next? Okay, so we go to Africa, we come back. What can we expect here in the immediate future?
Well, I'm writing a collection of stories about the experience for local publications, and so I'll be trying to convey to readers as much as I can about what we experienced. And so people can look for those stories as they start appearing. They'll be running more or less throughout the summer.
And in the meantime, they can go to some websites that we're going to put up. If they want some more information, we'll make sure to give that, and we've been making some available throughout the program. PipelineWorldwide.org, PipelineWorldwide.org/partners, and then, of course, thereader.com.
Yep.
Leo Adambiga, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing this story about the journey to Africa. We appreciate it, and best wishes to you moving forward. Congratulations on the award.
Thank you, Kathy.
You bet. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.